She was a judge. In full robe. Behind the wheel of her own car. But that didn't stop a cop from demanding she step out. Without cause, without reason. What happened next? A single live stream turned silence into a national reckoning. This isn't just a traffic stop. It's a wake-up call. The clock on Officer Cody Langston's patrol car dashboard ticked over to 6:42 p.m. The sun was slipping behind the row of maple trees lining Ashton Street, the quietest residential stretch in Brookhaven, Mississippi. Wide porches, white picket fences, and brick mailboxes stood like silent reminders that this was old money territory, families who had lived here for generations, steeped in silence and the kind of power that never needed to announce itself. Cody, 38, took a sip from his scratched steel coffee thermos. 2 more hours until shift change. And then he saw it. A sleek black Mercedes S-Class gliding through the intersection, each motion deliberate, almost calculating. No red lights run. No traffic violations. But too slow. Suspiciously slow. Someone driving like they've got something to hide, Cody muttered as he flicked on the patrol lights. His hand instinctively reached for the radio. This is Unit 9-4. Conducting a traffic stop on a black Mercedes with no rear plate, single occupant. Ashton and Maple. The vehicle pulled to the curb beneath a massive oak tree. No sudden movements, no signs of panic. As Cody approached, the window rolled down before he could even touch the door. A voice came through, clear, calm, unshaken. "Good evening, officer." He hesitated. A woman, but mid-60s. Silver hair neatly pinned back. Upright posture. Eyes composed. And wearing a black judicial robe. Not the kind worn in churches. The kind worn in court. From the bench. In the courtrooms where Cody had once stood below, waiting to testify. "I'm Judge Naomi Sinclair," she said, her head nodding slightly. "This vehicle is mine. I'm on my way home from district court." Cody swallowed. "I'll need to see your license and registration, ma'am." No resistance. No challenge. Just a smooth, practiced movement. She handed over the documents like she'd done it 1,000 times before. Her gaze didn't waver. Only one question followed. "Is there a specific reason for this stop, officer?" Cody scanned the documents. They matched. Registration valid. No sign of tampering. And yet, something still felt off. Like a hairline crack in a mirror, barely visible, but impossible to ignore. "This vehicle matches the description of one involved in a vehicle theft earlier this afternoon," he said, his tone slowing, his eyes narrowing as if trying to lend more weight to the words. Naomi raised an eyebrow. "This car is registered in my name. You're welcome to confirm that with dispatch." "Yes, I'll do that," Cody said, turning back to his cruiser. But he kept watching her through the windshield. She didn't touch her phone. Didn't move. She just sat there, watching the sky darken with the same stillness that made him uneasy. Like she'd known this was coming. Like this wasn't the first time. The story began with a glance, and a bias buried deep beneath the veneer of professional suspicion. What Officer Cody Langston didn't yet realize was that he had just crossed a line with someone the entire city was learning not to underestimate twice. Cody sat inside his patrol car, radio crackling with static. Dispatch had just confirmed. The vehicle was not listed in any stolen reports. Registration matched. Owner, Naomi Sinclair. Occupation, senior judge. Everything was clean. There was no legitimate reason to prolong the stop. And yet, he didn't start the engine. Didn't return the documents. Didn't end the stop as protocol would dictate. Instead, Cody furrowed his brow, fingers tapping the steering wheel. Something inside him resisted the clarity of the facts. It wasn't a behavioral issue, it was a feeling. A disconnect between the image of a black woman and a gleaming Mercedes parked in a neighborhood known for its old money and white lineage. A feeling never taught at the academy, but etched into him by the hushed warnings his father used to whisper, "Be careful with what doesn't look like it belongs." He opened the door and stepped out again, walking once more toward the window. Naomi Sinclair hadn't moved. Her hands still rested calmly on the steering wheel. The chill of the evening breeze touched her face, but her composure held firm, like something carved from stone. "Ma'am," Cody said, his voice low but firm, "I need you to step out of the vehicle for further verification." Naomi tilted her head slightly, eyes sharp as a blade in velvet. "On what grounds are you asking me to exit the vehicle?" she asked. Her tone wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of someone who knew every word of the law by heart. "Just procedure," Cody replied, unblinking. "No," she stated flatly. "That's not procedure. I've provided valid identification. You've verified everything. This stop is concluded. You are now exceeding your authority." Her voice wasn't harsh. She didn't raise it, but each word struck like a quiet indictment. Cody clenched his jaw. "Do you have something to hide, ma'am? Is that why you won't step out?" he asked, words spilling before reason could pull them back. Naomi blinked. Just once. Softly. But it was enough to freeze the air inside the car. "I have nothing to hide, Officer Langston," she said evenly. "But I am under no obligation to comply with an unlawful request, especially one made to satisfy your bias." He stood motionless. The discomfort roiling inside him wasn't caused by her actions, but by her calm. That unshakable composure made him feel like he was the one on trial, right there on the side of the road. Badged, armed, in control, had suddenly been pushed into a defensive posture. Across the street, a teenage boy had begun filming with his phone. Naomi's face appeared on the screen, poised, unmoved, wearing the expression of someone who had lived through 1,000 unnecessary inspections simply for the color of her skin. For the first time during that shift, Cody felt it. He was no longer in control. And in that moment he understood, authority no longer resided in the flashing lights atop a patrol car. Across the street, 17-year-old Malik Jefferson, a senior at Brookhaven High, held his phone steady, its camera fixed on the unfolding scene. The image trembled slightly in his hands, but the patrol car's headlights cast Naomi Sinclair's face in stark relief, clear, poised, and painfully human. Malik didn't speak. He let the original audio play, the judge's voice, calm and measured, clashing against Officer Langston's tense silence. A woman stepped off the porch of a nearby house and whispered, "What are you filming, baby?" "This," Malik murmured, eyes locked on his screen. "This is what they don't teach in civics class." In the footage, Naomi remained seated, hands still on the wheel. Cody stood beside the driver's side window, fists clenched, his gaze flicking between the judge and the small crowd now forming behind him. A few residents stepped closer, raising phones of their own. No yelling, no threats. But in their collective stillness, something was counting down. Malik tapped live. The caption was simple. Judge in robe being harassed in Brookhaven. No crime. Just suspicion. Within 3 minutes, views climbed into the hundreds. Then thousands. Comments began flooding in. At Truth Huntress, "Is that Judge Sinclair? She sentenced my cousin. She's tough but fair. This is messed up." At Bulk Justice 20, "Typical. They see black plus Mercedes equals theft." At Real Brad Tucker, "Somebody call her court. This cop is done." Langston began to notice the stares. Eyes that no longer held curiosity, but quiet judgment. He stepped back half a pace, suddenly aware of the pressure rising around him, not from the woman in the driver's seat, but from the silent witnesses holding glowing rectangles, recording everything. Naomi turned toward Malik's phone. She didn't say a word, but her gaze, calm, unwavering, spoke volumes. As if she knew, in a country where truth is often buried beneath badges and polished statements, video is the one testimony that cannot be dismissed. And this time, truth didn't need words. Just a look, a light, and a live stream. 12 hours later, Malik's 3.5-minute clip had surpassed 1 million views across platforms. The hashtags #JudgeSinclair and #BrookhavenBias caught fire, blazing across Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, spreading like wildfire in a drought. Before the local press could react, national outlets like CNN, MSNBC, and The Guardian had already picked up the story. The next morning, the front page of the Brookhaven Ledger carried a bold, unflinching headline. "Stopped for looking suspicious? A judge, a car, and a glance that needed no justification." The media dubbed her the woman who held principal in silence. Legal analysts declared, unprecedented, a judge treated like a suspect, while still wearing her judicial robe. Under mounting media pressure, the Brookhaven Police Department held an emergency press conference at 10 a.m. at headquarters. Police Chief Raymond Slater, 61, appeared stiff and visibly strained, his silver hair slicked back to the point of rigidity. Though he tried to maintain a neutral tone, his eyes darted constantly toward the sea of press cameras. "We are conducting an internal investigation," he said. "We respect the legal process and are committed to transparency." But then came a single line that detonated across social media within minutes. "We have not yet concluded that Officer Langston acted improperly. The public should await the full findings." That line, those few words, turned the press conference into digital wildfire. Comments ignited across platforms. At Courtwatch ADL, not improper? So wearing a judge's robe is suspicious now. At NPR_legal team, if there hadn't been video, would anyone have believed her? At Real Malik J, I recorded the video. But she's the one who made the entire system tremble, without raising her voice. By that afternoon, a hand-drawn poster created by students at Brookhaven High School began circulating widely. Judge Naomi Sinclair behind the wheel, her eyes calm and fixed forward, surrounded by handwritten words. I didn't need to shout. Truth has a sound of its own. A new development emerged around 7 p.m. that evening. During a replay of the original footage on the local news, a sharp-eyed viewer noticed a small but critical detail. In the reflection of Judge Sinclair's rearview mirror, the blinking light from Cody Langston's body cam briefly cut out, then flicked back on 2 seconds later. It happened at the exact moment of rising tension, when Sinclair calmly asked for the legal basis of being ordered out of her car. Independent investigative journalists quickly reviewed the footage. Frame-by-frame analysis confirmed. The body cam had been turned off for 11 seconds. No audio. No front-facing video. And during that time, Langston's hand moved toward his waist, just shy of drawing his weapon. The silence was no longer background. It was evidence. The next morning, the Brookhaven Police Department felt frozen under pressure. The entire patrol division was called into an emergency briefing. On the main screen at the front of the room, a still frame from Langston's body cam hung like a ghost, paused at minute 11, the moment audio went dead. Captain Monroe from Internal Affairs entered without greeting or preamble. We are launching a formal investigation into the incident involving Judge Naomi Sinclair, he said. Officer Langston, as of this moment, you are placed on administrative leave with pay until the investigation concludes. The room went silent. Cody Langston sat in the third row, jaw clenched, eyes locked ahead. He knew then, this was no longer something the department could manage. It had already moved beyond their control. We've extracted all data from the dash cam, body cam, and radio logs, Monroe continued. According to the system records, audio from the body cam was manually muted, exactly for 11 seconds. This was not a technical glitch. The mute button was physically pressed. A soft hiss escaped someone's lips. On the screen, the video replayed the moment. The footage remained visible, but the sound vanished, precisely when Judge Sinclair asked for the reason she was being ordered out of the car, and Officer Langston stood silent, his hand inches from his belt. When audio resumed, his voice was lower, tighter, drier. A young officer near the back let out a breath. He muted it, right then. Jesus. Langston shot up from his chair. It wasn't intentional. I had no reason. You'll have a chance to explain, Monroe interrupted, calm but firm. Just not here. At that same moment, across town inside the newsroom of the Brookhaven Times, veteran reporter Lydia Monroe was editing the lead for Sunday's special edition. On her screen, the headline read, When Justice Wears No Blue. Beneath it, a still image from Malik's livestream. Judge Naomi Sinclair, parked roadside, both hands gently resting on the steering wheel, her eyes steady on the officer like someone who had seen too many glances go wrong. A judge wrongly profiled. A body cam muted. Internal Affairs now involved, Lydia typed quickly. This is no longer an isolated incident. It's a fracture, a reflection, and proof that even the law can be placed under suspicion when it wears the wrong skin. At a small cafe in South Brookhaven, 3 law students from the University of Mississippi huddled around an iPad. One of them whispered. She didn't need to yell. Didn't need to say much. She just stood firm. And everything wrong revealed itself. Another nodded slowly. Justice doesn't always need handcuffs. Sometimes, it only needs a judge's robe and a camera that doesn't blink. Later that afternoon, following a closed-door session with the Special Investigations Task Force at the Mississippi District Court, Naomi Sinclair returned home in silence. Her cottage-style house on the corner of Spring Hollow looked exactly as it had for the past 30 years. Modest, steady, untouched by noise. She stepped inside, set her leather briefcase on the coffee table, and lowered herself into the armchair by the window. The light of dusk filtered through sheer curtains, casting a glow across a framed photo on the wall. A black man in an old police uniform stood proudly between 2 children, one a boy, the other a girl with braided pigtails. Naomi reached out, her fingertips brushing the frame. Her father, Harold Sinclair. Brookhaven Police, 1970s. She closed her eyes. Memory swept her back to the summer of 1982. She was 19, freshly admitted to Spelman College. One evening, after walking home from the local bookstore, she had been stopped by 2 white officers right outside her house. They claimed she looked unfamiliar. She was ordered to lean against the patrol car, her bag searched, her address questioned, despite the front door being just steps away. Her father had been home on leave that night. He stepped outside with his shoes still untied, voice low but steady. "What are you doing to my daughter?" One of the officers replied. She looked suspicious. "We're just checking. She just bought books from the shop on Main. That's my daughter. This is our home." Naomi remembered his eyes, neither angry nor afraid. Just tired. The exhaustion of a man who'd spent a lifetime having to explain the legitimacy of his family's presence in the very neighborhood they lived in. When the officers finally drove off, her father had said only 3 things. "This won't be the last time. Don't let them make you angry. And if you can, let them see for themselves they were wrong." For years, she thought she'd forgotten. But in that moment, when Cody Langston's hand drifted near his weapon, that memory returned, cutting through her practiced calm like a blade. And it was then she made her choice. Not to rage, not to shout, but to let the world witness, and reckon with what was wrong. The doorbell rang, slicing through the memory. It was Amy, her court clerk, arriving with the file for an upcoming hearing. Naomi accepted the folder, but her eyes remained on the photo. "Are you okay?" Amy asked softly. Naomi nodded. "I'm fine. But the world isn't. And that's why I still have work to do." In a small cafe on Main Street, the clinking of spoons against ceramic cups kept time for conversations no longer easy to ignore. A group of law students from the University of Mississippi sat gathered, each with an espresso in hand, but their focus was fixed on one thing: the now viral 3-minute, 9-second video of Judge Naomi Sinclair being questioned by Officer Langston on a quiet street. "What's the issue?" asked a white student, a senior in pre-law. He was doing his job. Maybe he misidentified her, but does it have to become a national scandal? A black woman across the table leaned in, not angry, just tired. Because it wasn't the first time. And next time it might not be a judge. It could be my sister. My mother. Me. That sentiment echoed in barbershops, classrooms, living rooms. At Hillside Barbershop, the old barber shook his head as he pulled the cape from a customer's neck. "I used to think once we had black folks in robes, stuff like this would stop. But clearly, even the robe doesn't shield her from judgment." Inside a Brookhaven South High School sociology class, the teacher paused her lecture on the justice system. "Raise your hand if you've ever been pulled over without knowing why." More than half the class lifted their hands. She exhaled. "We need to have an honest conversation about how the law is enforced. Not just what's written, but how it's actually used." At that exact moment, a long unreleased interview aired on local television. Recorded in 1998, it featured a young Naomi Sinclair, then a public defender, speaking to recent graduates. Bias doesn't need a gun. It only needs silence long enough to become law. The clip quickly went viral. On social media, thousands of comments poured in under the hashtag #NaomiWasRe. But the true turning point came later that evening when a group of young Brookhaven police officers, both white and black, gathered for a private meeting inside an old, abandoned church on the south end of town. No reporters. No cameras. Just a room full of uniforms and, for the first time, officers willing to say aloud, "We don't need to wait for orders. We need to fix the way we think." One young officer stood up, voice trembling. "I've done what Langston did. No one ever pushed back, but now I know. I was wrong." The room fell silent, not out of shame, but because, for once, change wasn't coming from a press conference. It was coming from within the very people who wore the badge. The Brookhaven Town Hall was packed the next morning. Though it wasn't a criminal trial, the atmosphere inside was taut as a stretched wire. The benches were filled with reporters, law students, and local residents, some of whom had marched by flashlight outside the police station just days before. 3 discrete cameras were mounted at the corners of the chamber. A wooden plaque above the panel read, "Public Conduct Oversight Committee," a quiet reminder, today, no one was above the law. Judge Naomi Sinclair, wearing a navy blue suit instead of her judicial robe, walked in with the calm presence of someone used to taking the bench. But today, she wasn't the one holding the gavel, she was the one giving testimony. Cody Langston had arrived early. He wore a plain white shirt. No badge. No weapon. No utility belt. Just a 38-year-old man, hands folded in front of him, eyes following every step of the woman he had once ordered out of her car, not knowing she was the living embodiment of the justice he'd sworn to uphold. Presiding over the hearing was Rosemary Alden, a former prosecutor with more than 30 years in public service. She began, "We are here not simply to judge the actions of a single officer, but to examine how power is used, and sometimes misused." With a voice clear and composed, Naomi recounted the entire incident. She didn't dramatize. She didn't condemn. She detailed each moment with the precision of someone reciting court transcripts. But then came a moment that drew the air from the room. I don't say this out of personal injury. I say it because I once believed that dedication, office, or even a judge's robe could shield me from bias. I was wrong. Then came Cody's turn. He stood slowly, walking to the podium without notes, without pretense. "I have no excuse," he said, his voice rough. "I was trained to be alert, but no one ever taught me how to distinguish between professional instinct and unconscious bias. I was wrong, and I need to start over." The committee didn't deliberate for long. After just 20 minutes, they returned with their decision. Cody Langston would be suspended for 60 days without pay and required to complete a certified course on racial bias and professional conduct. One member of the board concluded, "We are not here to punish. We are here to correct. But let it be clear, should this happen again, the consequences will not be this lenient." When the hearing ended, Naomi didn't linger to answer questions from the press. She left the courthouse in silence, her posture straight, her expression composed, the same way she had faced down an entire system. But in the eyes of many that day, she was no longer just a judge. She had become living proof of a deeper truth. Justice doesn't begin with the law. It begins with how we choose to see each other. The atmosphere in Brookhaven was no longer the same. The story of Judge Naomi Sinclair and Officer Cody Langston's hearing didn't end with a legal resolution. It opened a season of reckoning across the community. Every weekend, on the small plaza in front of the Central Library, residents gathered for what became known as the Open Justice Forums. No banners, no megaphones, just circles of wooden chairs where teachers, retired officers, college students, and single mothers sat down together to ask heavy, simple questions. Do we really understand the law? Who is actually being protected? How many cases like Judge Sinclair's never had a live stream? One evening in early June, at Westbrook High School, the civic politics class turned unusually electric. An 11th grader named Malik stood and asked the teacher, "If a judge can be suspected just because of her skin color, then for us, people with no title, what are the chances we'll ever be treated fairly?" No one in the room could answer. Not even the teacher. At Mr. Earl's barbershop on Walnut Street, the debates ran late into the night. Elders recalled the 1960s. Younger voices countered with the latest live streams. One young man said, "Silence is a form of complicity." Judge Sinclair's story isn't just to be told, it's a call to act. Some families began attending city council meetings. For the first time in years, they confronted the police chief directly, demanding detailed data on racial breakdowns in traffic stops. They asked to review the department's training programs. These were no longer isolated voices. This was a community learning how to hold power accountable. And perhaps the most striking change wasn't found in new policies or public apologies. It was in the way people looked when a police car passed by. They no longer looked away. They looked straight ahead, as if to say, "We're watching. We're not silent anymore." A week after the hearing, Judge Naomi Sinclair returned to courtroom 4 of the Mississippi County Courthouse as usual. Still wearing her black judicial robe, still walking calmly across the cold stone floor, but something had changed. Not in her, but in the way people looked at her when she entered. During a morning session for an administrative complaint hearing, a young man stood nervously before her, his voice shaking, eyes downcast. Naomi gently asked, "Do you understand why you're here today?" He nodded but said nothing. She looked at him steadily, her voice calm but resolute. "We are not just here to judge mistakes. We are here to understand why they happen and how to keep them from happening again." No one in the room interrupted. It was a small courtroom, but everyone felt it, a quiet, moral force alive in the space. It didn't need to raise its voice to be heard. Meanwhile, in the quiet of his backyard, Cody Langston sat in front of a blank sheet of paper. At the top, bold text read, "Reflection on Bias in Law Enforcement." Beside it sat his turned-off police radio. He had written and torn up 3 drafts already, but this time, he didn't begin with excuses. He wrote, "I didn't see her as a person. I only saw what I feared, not because it threatened me, but because I had never been taught how to face it fairly." For the first time in years of wearing the uniform, Cody wasn't thinking about authority, but about consequences. No one ordered him to write those words. No disciplinary mandate compelled him. It was simply a quiet beginning of a journey that didn't need chest beating or cries for forgiveness, but the courage to look inward. The story between Naomi and Cody didn't end with someone winning or losing. It ended where every meaningful story should begin. In awareness, in accountability, and in the reminder that justice isn't about the chair we sit in, but the way we choose to stand before each other and truly see.